Okay, so we've done our basic evaluation. We've got this engine, looks pretty good shape. Just for, again, discussion purposes, our compression readings are all good. Plugs look relatively well, and kind of indicates that we don't have an overfuel problem with a rich carburetor. Carburetor probably was running okay. Mixture is good. We don't have any oil problems or any coolant problems inside the cylinders. So now you know that, okay, basically I bought this engine. When I did run it, I didn't hear any knocks, okay? That's something else you gotta look for. I didn't hear any noises. I didn't hear any valve tappet noise, which again would be indication maybe a worn lifter or something like that. Again, real dirty oil, valve tappet noise, they would kind of go together, that okay, the oil hasn't been changed in this engine, and now we've got some tappets that are worn, some camshafts that are worn, and you're getting valve tappet noise. That's with hydraulic lifters. If you've got solid lifters, you're going to have some noise all the time. So basically we say, well, we did pretty good here. We bought this car. We've got a relatively solid engine. Let's just give it a good final tune-up, and we should be ready to go. One other quick thing you could do is, if you wanted to do, is do a fuel pump pressure test on it, which is basically just taking a pressure gauge, putting it on your fuel pump. You can either do a volume test and have it pump into a beaker, or see what the pressure is on your fuel pump. It's just a matter of hooking up a pressure gauge or a beaker to your fuel pump, cranking the engine over, and seeing how much fuel you get out and what the pressure is. 5 pounds pressure is more than enough to run this engine. And quantity-wise, maybe 6-8 ounces and maybe 8-9 turns of the engine cranking. But whatever you do, whenever you have any fuel lines exposed or any gas exposed, make sure your ignition circuit is grounded out somehow, that you're not going to get a stray spark and set the thing on fire, because then it's all over. Water pump, you can check for leaks on the water pump. Usually if they're noisy, grab the fan, shake it, try to move it. That would indicate a worn bearing. Or there is a weep hole in the bottom of them, see if there's any stain coming out of there. Just a quick check you can take. And again, none of these things require a lot of energy, a lot of maintenance, a lot of work. You know, nuts and bolts, pulling stuff apart. You don't have to do that. So we're going to tune it up. We've got the plugs out of it. Everything looked pretty good. Just you got to go to your manual, take your new spark plugs and gap your plugs accordingly. Okay, and you can start putting them in. The idea is don't over torque them. They don't have to go in there and be tight, you know, like a wheel lug wrench. You don't have to do that. Put them in there, gap them, put them in. Make sure they've got good gaskets on them, metal gaskets. If you've got an engine other than this one where you can't really reach that hole, take a piece of fuel line, rubber fuel line, maybe this long, and just stick it on the end and use that to go in. The good thing about that is if the plug starts to cross thread, the hose will slip on the plug before you do any damage. But you take a big 383 Chrysler or a big 455 Oldsmobile, some of these engines you can't even see the spark plug holes. So it's kind of hard to get 2 fingers down in there and get the plugs in there. So again, I always used to stick a piece of rubber hose on the end of these and just screw them in that way. You're not way down in there trying to get them started. If you feel any resistance, back off and try again. But again, there would be a torque for these. 35 pounds is more than enough, but look in the book. If you've got an aluminum cylinder head, you better look in the book. That's a whole different story. Aluminum cylinder heads, you've got to be very, very careful. You've got to be very, very careful taking a plug out of an aluminum cylinder head, because they do gall and they will bring threads with them when they come out if they've been in there a long, long time. So again, putting them in is not any big deal, but one little mistake can cause you a big problem. So we'll put our plugs in. Now, if you've got a car probably basically pre-1985 with points and condenser, that's right, points and condenser, remember them? That's the old school. They are dependable. They work great. Yeah, they need maintenance once in a while, but they're probably not as efficient at a real high RPM and for hot starts, hot spark, you know, to get them started in when it's cold weather. But they do work. They're dependable. If you've got them set right, If you got new points, a new condenser, this is a distributor out of a small block Chevy. They work. I don't have any trouble with them whatsoever. Everybody wants to put an electronic module in here. You can do it for probably 30, 35 bucks, and you're basically trouble-free. But what I tell people is if you put an electronic module in here and drive this car a lot, have another one in the trunk. Because when the electronic module goes bad, you can't fix it. These points and condenser, if something happens with these, I'll get home with them. One way or the other, I'll get these set up that I can get home with it if we should have a problem with it on the road. But again, you put your points and your plugs in, you get your gap. If you've got a distributor like this and it's not electronic, make sure that you put lubricant on the cam, okay, that rubs the point block. Very, very critical that you do that. This one is out of the car. You could put this in a vise and set it all up right here and then just drop it in the car. And you got to set your timing anyway. But you can do it in the car. It's no big deal. And you're all set, ready to go. So points and condenser, or while this is out, you could put an electronic module in there. It's entirely up to you. One thing else you want to check is the rotor. Make sure that the rotor looks good. There's no cracks in the rotor that sits on top of here. You can check your mechanical advance. This has a mechanical advance on it and a vacuum advance. This helps you with your initial start. This is your high-speed advance right here. These weights fly out and actually turn the point plate so that you advance the timing as the engine's running. New car, it's all done electronically. Computer does it. Here, it's all mechanical. If you want to check this vacuum advance, all you got to do is take a vacuum pump, okay, and you can put a hose between the vacuum pump and the mechanical advance and pipe it up, and you can actually see this rod pull on your plate here that advances the points and the timing in the car. A quick check. Another thing, once you start the car, you can just take the vacuum hose off that feeds this, take it off and put it on, and with a timing light, you'll see that timing mark change up and down on the scale on the front of the engine here. So, again, we've put the points and plugs in, we've checked our vacuum advance, we've looked at everything looks good, no play in the distributor bushings. Just take a look at the cap and the wires. What do they look like? Are there any kind of white deposits in here on your distributor cap? Carbon tracks, you'll actually see carbon tracks. And what that means is that there's a crack in here and the spark is firing across two of them at the same time. So I just looked inside. In most cases, they should be relatively clean. You might see a little corrosion, but this one here looks very, very good, very, very clean. Just take a look at the plug wires. If you see any cracks in these are older style plug wires. It's not high energy ignition. That came out probably about, I think the first ones were 1969. The wires will be bigger, much higher voltage. These are about 40,000 volts. High energy ignition in the old days was about 60,000 volts. So look them over, see if you see anything bad about them. If you're really concerned, there's an ohm meter reading in your manual for what the resistance should be in this plug. And you can take, well, this is just a little one, but you can take an ohm meter and you can actually check the resistance in these plug wires. And that's really old school and it takes quite a while. But if you suspect that you've got a bad plug wire or a weak plug wire, you can actually test them. Today, you'll throw this away and go to the auto parts store and buy a new set, let's face it. But you can check the ohm reading in these wires, and there will be a reading in the manual as to what they should be. So you've checked your cap, everything looks good there, your wires look relatively well, look at the ends. These wire ends are really, really susceptible to heat and cracking because they're down in some cases. On this engine, not so much, but on some of the V8 engines, they're right next to the manifold. They get hot, they get brittle, and when you're pulling one of these wires off, do not pull it like this. Get down in there, twist it, and pull it by the boot. They actually make pliers for these, okay? Even the newer ones that you pull on the boot. Never pull on the wire because you'll separate the carbon in here, or actually break, on the old real ones with our wire, you'll break the wire. So again, always when you pull these off, and they will be stuck, they will be very, very hard, they'll be baked on in some cases, make sure you wiggle them a little bit and then pull them off. And otherwise, okay, I got a good set of wires, and you can actually ruin them just by taking them off the car.